Hello everyone again, this is David, your host, and I am here to review Season 1, Episode 7, The War Prayer. Uh, let's see here. I don't think we meet anybody new on this one, or at least that will have any sort of recurring theme. Another heavily memmed episode. So, it starts off with Delenn talking about her friend. Her friend is a poem. She recites Tila, which is some form of Minbari poetry. And she just got done, evidently, having a poetry recital. And so they were kind of kibitzing back and forth about their friendship, and maybe she had heard bits of that poem and some other recitals of hers, and they kind of giggled, and it's revealed that Delenn's friend is going to be going to Earth. Her name is Shalmayan. Well, as she's leaving Delenn's palace, or not palace, her quarters, you hear this swishing sound, and it's a guy with a butterfly blade. And you hear it click into place, and she is stabbed in the side, and as she's laying crumpled to the ground, he takes some sort of branding device, brands her on the top of the head, and says, "Stay away from Earth, you freak." And then, of course, we go into the opening credits, and it's revealed that this is the sixth attack from a group called Home Guard. Now, keep that, it's an Earth First kind of group, and keep that name, Home Guard, in the back of your mind, because you will be hearing it again several times, as not only this episode, but this little kind of, as the story, Season 1 goes on, you'll be hearing of Home Guard quite a bit. Now, it also touches in, as you can see, Michael Straczynski, or J. Michael Straczynski, JMS, kind of is talking about, in 200 plus years, have we gotten rid of racism? Or would this count as racism or speciesism, xenophobia? Have we really come that far in 200 years? Well, it appears from this episode, no, we really haven't. It kind of reminds me of a couple of episodes in my personal life when I was in 10th or 11th grade. We were going downtown as part of a choir program. Roosevelt High School and all the other high schools were getting their choir groups together to sing, I believe, for the lighting of the Christmas tree in downtown Portland, Oregon. As we were in going into one of the shops in downtown, I walked in with my friend Aaron, no problem. Friend Glenn walked in, no problem. Even though we were wearing our Roosevelt jackets and everything, not a problem. As soon as our friend Malika walks in, and Malika is African American, she's got, really nice, I really liked her hair back then, afro. As soon as she walks in, bam, security was called to follow us around the store. And our friend Aaron is one of those who's kind of in denial about this sort of thing. It was just because we're from Roosevelt, and Roosevelt is a rough school and all that. Yeah, but Aaron, you and I walked in first. We had our Roosevelt jackets on. They didn't call security for us. And Aaron and Glenn, by the way, are the same color of skin I am. Malika is much darker than we are, and security was not called to follow us around that store until Malika walked in. And now you say, well, David, that was the 1980s. We got rid of all that stuff way back when. It doesn't, the see no evil, hear no evil kind of a thing. My nephew is in the Army Reserves, and he was doing his Army basic training in Georgia, I guess. And then he was going to go do his advanced training, but that was at a different base on a different side of Georgia from where he did his basic. Anyone who's in the military can correct me on that. Please do so in the comments section, because this is being relayed from 2012. 2012, we just had re-elected Barack Obama. Racism all of a sudden now magically has just gone away and doesn't exist anymore. Well, no. My nephew said when he was, because he was driving, because I guess he had been checked out on this certain vehicle, and when he was driving his buddies to the other base to complete their training, infantry training, stopped at and this way out of the way boondock kind of a gas station, and in big bright letters is a big sign that says, "Blacks do not stop here after dark to get gas, please." It's like, really? So we've gotten rid of racism. And you have to also wonder, too, what made this person stick that sign up there? Where you're in 2012 America, we just re-elected our first biracial president, and we're still having to stick up signs warning people of a certain color, "Don't come here, please. You're in danger if you do." So, kind of reminds me a lot of that when I watch this episode of these quote-unquote Earth First kind of a group. If you're other or alien, you're somehow less than we are, or somehow should be shunned or driven away or whatever, Back to the episode. A guy named Malcolm comes in, a nice blonde Aussie accent, and it turns out this is one of Ivanova's ex-husbands, or I should say Ivanova's ex-husband. I don't know if he is the only one, and they had no contact after 8 years, and so they kind of like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" kind of a thing, and he's like, "Okay, I'll try, be seeing you later." And she's like, "I wonder what that's all about." Another visionette we switch over to. Some couple of Centauri are taken into custody, and Londo Mollari goes into Sinclair's office to see, kind of what's going on. And it turns out to be a young boy and girl, evidently with some stolen credit chits. And they're kind of like, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" Well, evidently these two young kids are in love and they want to be married to each other. But we find out that the Centauri believe in arranged marriages and have practiced arranged marriages for over 1,000 years. And we also get to find out, too, that Londo Mollari has 3 wives at home, all of them through arranged marriages. So Londo wants to send these 2 kids back home because he's now starting to get grief from their families that these 2 kids get sent home, but they don't want to go home. They want to get married for love. And they're set, both of them, to get married through arranged marriages to other people whom they just, quite frankly, can't stand. So I'm wondering, does anybody here know about, I know some societies still practice arranged marriages, but I'm not sure exactly which societies those might be. I've heard like some of the Romanian, like the Roma, we call them gypsies here in the United States, practice arranged marriages still. I just saw a special about one, and of course this marriage lasted less than a month because they couldn't stand each other. And it was something that I had seen off of YouTube. But did anybody want to comment about they come from a different country or a different culture that still practices arranged marriages and how that works? I'd be really interested to hear that. Another sip of coffee. Now, Sinclair is going to go off to, I guess, a council meeting, and he winds up in Ambassador Kasha's quarters. And, you're always going to get Mem whenever you have Kosh doing anything. And basically Kosh, he gets informed. He wants to know if he's going to be at the council meeting and have anything to say. Kosh says, in typical Kosh fashion, we take no interest in the affairs of others. While this is going on, they're having their conversation, Sinclair looks over and sees this thing that's flashing images, this view screen. And Sinclair says, well, those are images from my world. And Kosh says, I'm studying. And he said, studying what? And Kosh shuts down and doesn't give him an answer in typical Kosh fashion. And usually if Kosh does give you an answer, it's what I call the Kosh non-answer. It has usually nothing to do with the subject at hand. Switch scenery. Ivanova gets a flower from Malcolm, a single rose that's been preserved in this tube. They say if he got it at a flower shop, or if he brought it all the way from Earth with him, or if it's a real rose or a fake rose. Most likely it's a fake rose, because getting fresh flowers in a space station, I believe the trip time from Earth to Babylon 5 is 5 days. If anyone can correct me on that, that sometimes gets a bit of discussion. Travel time from Earth to Babylon 5. And it becomes center of contention when you're much later in the story arc, having to do with bacon and eggs. And any Babylon 5 fan will know exactly what I'm talking about. If you don't know about it, it's a spoiler alert, so I'm going to let you find out that one on your own. Garibaldi ends up confronting a worker from the docks after Mayon's attack, the Minbari who was attacked, and has this kind of a greasy-looking worker, and the greasy-looking worker evidently had some sort of knife that he was using, and he says, this knife has fresh blood on it. Well, Mayan was attacked and she was stabbed, and whoever attacked her probably had the blood still on his knife. Well, Garibaldi sends this knife off for testing, and it comes back negative. It evidently was the worker's own blood that he was using this knife to open up packages in his where his docking job is, and cut himself with the knife. We also learn too, Garibaldi releases the guy, but only under high surveillance, because he wants to see basically if the guy ends up going to one of these pro-Earth groups, because he would be the kind of person that a lot of these groups like to attract. So Garibaldi follows this guy around under high-level surveillance, and we learn that there are fights breaking out all over Babylon 5 between humans and non-humans. Humans attacking alien populations, and a lot of the alien ambassadors are getting really concerned, especially Jakar. Jakar nearly starts a riot with the other races, accusing Sinclair and Garibaldi of not doing a good enough job of keeping the aliens safe. So he causes a scene. Malcolm and Ivanova, switching back to them, they're at dinner and they talk about what their relationship was, and talk about a little bit about their divorce, and that Malcolm has come to accept that with Ivanova, her job comes first, and he has secured birthing at Babylon 5. He's got a business. He just kind of wants to use her for some contacts, but, and she's kind of like, well, hey, pal, let's take it slow, don't rush into things. And he's like, no, okay. We switch on. The male Centauri, he and his girlfriend were both attacked. The Centauri pretty severely. He ends up getting shot by one of these Earth First types. Luckily, Veer, who was related, I believe, to the male Centauri, was like a cousin, just moments after the attack happened upon the scene, and obviously got help for them. The guy that was under surveillance, he ends up getting attacked pretty viciously by some Drazi. In fact, Garibaldi mentions that had he not been under surveillance, he most likely would have been beaten to death. So we see him in MedLab, and lo and behold, who visits him but Malcolm. And Malcolm, thinking that he's not being watched and not aware that he is under surveillance, Malcolm basically tries and does recruit him to one of these Earth First kind of groups. And Sinclair had seen Malcolm in Ivanova's quarters. He was taking a vid call with Ivanova. Malcolm was kind of in the background, and he's like, hey, I've seen that guy was with Ivanova. So they went and showed Ivanova the video, and of course Ivanova realizes that he's probably trying to use her to for some reason, but he's using her for her military contacts at Babylon 5. Not because he's the forlorn lover. So that, of course, gets her hackles up a little bit. They have, and they kind of back and forth, Malari and Veer end up arguing over love, and Malari makes a very heavily memmed statement about his father and him having a discussion. My shoes are too tight, but it doesn't matter because I've forgotten how to dance. And that statement by Malari has been heavily debated in the mem groups. My shoes are too tight, but it doesn't matter because I've forgotten how to dance. I guess his father was quite old and was crying, and Malari walked in on him, why are you crying, Papa? And he says, my shoes are too tight, but it doesn't matter because I've forgotten how to dance. So I would be really curious to know in the comment section what people think about that statement. What does it mean to them? Basically, what it to me is kind of like a strike while, things are hot. While, basically do things while you're young, get married to who you love, go places and do things because eventually you're going to get old. We all do, hopefully. And once you do that, you're going to forget, and all you're going to have are the memories. So that's my little take on that one. Switch over to a party. Sinclair meets with the alien ambassadors, and Malcolm shows up as the date with Susan. Sinclair ends up overhearing, basically Sinclair, knowing that Malcolm is in this group, Sinclair makes some kind of gruff statements towards the aliens, appears to be cold and distant from them, and so Malcolm reads that, this guy is ripe for recruitment, which is exactly what Sinclair wanted to do. And in fact, later in Ivanova's quarters, I can't remember if it's Ivanova's or Sinclair's quarters, but anyway, Malcolm tries and does in fact recruit Sinclair. So, as a test of loyalty, Sinclair the very next morning goes in front of the B5 Council, says nothing to worry about. The people that have orchestrated these attacks have all fled back to Earth. Of course, he knows they're still there, still doing their thing. But as a test of loyalty, in order to get the heat off of this pro-Earth group, he says, these guys have fled back to Earth. We've told Earth Central. The investigation's over. And of course, the alien ambassadors don't buy it, but Garibaldi, being in on everything, has basically said, look, I don't care what you think. This is now in the hands of Earth Central. we're washing our hands of everything, and which kind of confuses a lot of the alien ambassadors. The others are kind of enraged. And Malcolm is very happy because now his group seemingly can operate in the open on Babylon 5. Switching back on over to Dr. Franklin's clinic. The male Cardassian does eventually recover from his shot. Londo has his cousin meet them. And basically what's going to happen is Londo has arranged for the two Centauri children to go home, but not to be married as they think, but basically they will go home, and Centauri allows basically they're going to go home into a period of fosterage under one of Londo Mollari's cousins, who is a very high-ranking Centauri, and they will be tutelaged under him in Centauri ways and customs long enough to where they will become legally of age to marry, and at that point in time, Londo's cousin will basically allow them to get married to whomever they want, even for love, and so they don't have to marry these horrible people in arranged marriages. So this nice little couple ends up being able to go home, get tutored by a very high-ranking family, and then they will be able to marry whomever they want for love instead of in an arranged marriage. So, yay! Flipping on over into kind of the ending scenario, and what happens is they meet in a cargo bay. They meet Malcolm, and they're waiting for the other members of this Earth First group to show up. And what happens is all of a sudden these guys literally appear out of shadows, or the shadow, not meaning the shadow race, but just, a shadow that you get, when you have a light source. And what happens is, evidently they have a blacklight camouflage, and they got a hold of some prototypes in the military. Military being a conservative type of organization and somewhat sympathetic to these kinds of groups, somehow they get a hold of prototypes, and that's how they've been able to get onto Babylon 5 as well as commit their crimes without being caught, is because they can literally appear out of thin air. As another test, and Malcolm starts talking about, in 2 days there's going to be a massive uprising on Babylon 5. All 4 ambassadors, Delenn, Mollari, Jakar, and Kosh, are to be assassinated. That will send a signal back to Earth for the ambassadors at Earth. Now, do they have a Kosh on Earth as well? That would be interesting, because as far as we know, there's only the one Kosh at Babylon 5, as far as ambassadors are concerned. But anyway, all the major ambassadors are to be assassinated in a test of loyalty to Sinclair. They want him to kill one of the ambassadors. Sinclair pretends like he's going to do it, ends up disarming Malcolm. There's a firefight. Garibaldi, who has been monitoring the situation, him and troops come charging through the door. Long story short, Malcolm and his buddies are in fact all captured. So the entire Earth First group, at least on Babylon 5, has been completely eliminated, or at least we see them in chains, in prison chains, going back to Earth. Malcolm turns around and said, I never knew you, Susan. And she goes, I never knew you either. And where are you going? I'm going to go get drunk with the rest of the aliens. or no, she says, sorry, in this particular episode, and this is what happens when I don't use my notes, is I go back off of memory. But what she said basically is, I found these aliens to be a lot more human than people like you. So, an interesting episode. I would be really interested in the comments section of people to talk about what they thought of this episode. Do you guys agree with me about the racism that I saw on display both in the past and now? Have you encountered any form of racism, homophobia? I can quote chapter and verse on that one, being an openly gay man myself and trying to grow up in the 70s and 80s up in Alaska with a very conservative, well, my family wasn't too bad. But a lot of my friends were extremely conservative, and I was relentlessly teased a lot in high school over the way I dressed and the way I acted and everything else about me. Or xenophobia, have you experienced any of that? And I would be interested to know in the comments what happened to you and how you were able to deal with it. So anyways, as always, comment, like, and subscribe, and please share. And I will be seeing you on the next episode. Hope y'all have a good rest of your evening.